So I know folks are still having really good conversations, and I hate to interrupt the flow of people's work, but I think what we'll do is just have someone from each group. Since we have a small enough space, I think we can sort of just do it in this like we are, and have someone from each group kind of in just a couple of minutes talk us through what their group approach was, which problem or which case you chose. Briefly talk about how you chose to approach it, and if you've got slides to show us, then you can just sort of show us. If you've got other setup, then we can do the other visuals, and that's great too. And I'm just going to pass the mic. So is there anyone that's dying to go first? How about from this group?
Yeah, we can go ahead and go. Okay. We undertook the altered mental status one, and we felt that the information was just way too broad for like any single lecture to be covered, because most of these are lectures in their own right. So we wanted to try to create a larger structural framework for residents or med students to learn off of. So instead of trying to use AEIOU tips is the motivator, we wanted to break it down into broader categories. So toxic metabolic, toxicology, traumatic, hypoperfusion, and then use a case to sort of motivate each one of those. So kind of expand the cases out a little bit, and then focus on being able to camp it into larger categories, and then refer them onto something like AEIU tips as an alternative, like later on in their career, to get more detail.
Did you have starting on visual stuff, or?
We did, and it was using those basic techniques that he was describing, full slide images, and then minimizing the text as much as possible. So
just using simple.
Step back just 10 feet from the screen.
So just using really simple, vibrant images to sort of convey specific topic. It's a great image.
Yep.
And we essentially took away the definition, which felt like a paragraph of something that they're just going to sit there and read and not listen to you as a presenter. And so just left that as something to present and something that can go on a handout, but not something that needs to be in slides.
About this group here.
So we did AlteredMental Status as well. We actually had 3 computers going, generating images. We kind of stayed within the framework as given. For definition, we agree this is a bulky definition that no one's going to read. But when you read it and you really explore it, it's really broken down into 2 different patient types: your sleepy, more lethargic patient, and then your hyper alert, agitated patient. So we actually broke that into 2 slides. First slide just had a picture of a very sleepy person, and then the second slide had kind of a hyper agitated, your typical crazy looking person, to demonstrate that, you know, this could be a lethargic patient. Think about them as altered, but also think of your patient who you might dismiss as psych, or who might just be all over the place. These are both your different categories of altered mental status patients. For causes, had a great slide with, I don't know if you can share it, had the AEIOU and kind of kindergarten letters, and then had a picture of beef tips underneath it. And we also stressed that we're not going to be able to teach AEIOU tips thoroughly. I mean, that's a lecture in and of itself. So our point with this is not to teach you the aspects of it, but to know the mnemonic exists, so that if you're practicing clinically and you have a brain fart, you can Google this and you can go through those individually. And then we even thought, you know, if the point of this lecture, whatever it is, we could stress the one aspect of that in this lecture afterwards with some kind of image. And then for workup, you know, as much imagery as possible. For your vital signs, have a monitor rather than, say, vital signs. For your glucose, have a glucometer. And then our plan was to kind of use the case as a template for presentation and work through the case as we went through the different aspects. Is there anything else you want to add?
Michelle, for your group?
I'll be your prop.
You can be my prop. You're going to stand over there so that they can see it. So we took acute chest pain as our topic, so we decided we'd just frame it with a very simple title slide. And then we talked about the epidemiology. So with this slide, we had the crowd of people, and 1 in 50 will die, with the graphic of the red circle with the line through it coming in to illustrate that one of the people in that picture will. And so we would talk about some of the other epidemiology stuff with this slide.
Powerful. Look, she picked it up from back there.
Yep. And then we were going to go into our case study and talk about, this is the 58-year-old man with substernal crushing chest pain, feels like there's an elephant on his chest. All of that kind of go through and then show the EKG changes that he had with this STEMI that he's having, highlighting that. And then we went to the treatments. So you're going to give this patient aspirin, you're going to give them nitroglycerin, et cetera.
Just kind of have, if you have text there, like it's contiguous to your image of those things are appearing simultaneously as you're narrating, kind of all those principles as well.
Right. Yep. That's it.
Yeah, so that's like really minimal text in all of those, but the point gets across without it, right? And then that allows you to sort of present as the speaker. How about from this group? Go for it.
So we also did the AlteredMental Status, and we got actually, can you go back to that slide? Yeah. So we thought we'd open with the case as sort of the attention grabber, and so we just looked for a simple graphic that would be like a young person with the AlteredMental Status, and we talked about using like a gray box on top just to do like a title or a brief descriptor of the patient. And then we got a little hung up on sort of AIU tips versus, say, a system representation of, going through the causes for AlteredMental Status, and ultimately decided on doing the system representation, and had several different ideas about how you could present that, potentially with like a figure of a person with different, arrows pointing to different organ systems. And then the other, wait for it, this is really pretty cool, high tech. At the bottom of my page, we wrote out a slide that could have like 6 different boxes, and each box would be a hyperlink with a simple image like a heart or, a skull and crossbones for tox. And then the presenter could click on each of those, and that would flash up, behind the hyperlink, just a few words that were giving examples of the differential under that category. That's about as far as we got.
That's great. And using the visuals of that, I like that sort of last thing, using the visual image of very simple to identify hyperlinked things that you can, like everyone sort of will recognize that the picture of the kidney is, your renal system, and you can click on that rather than having the list of the differential diagnosis in words, right? So I think that hopefully this has been helpful for folks, and I think working through some of these and keeping in mind some of the, especially the most important of these multimedia principles will help you as you work on creating your own presentations in your own settings. And we appreciate your participation today.
Did you get a second just to fill out this evaluation before we leave? We'd greatly appreciate it.
And again, thank you all for staying and coming. I shared it with. What's that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you do with, I'm just going to say stuff that is technically more complicated. So, and you could like pick your poison, So the electron transport chain and reactive oxygen species generation.
Yeah.
Okay. So sort of like, okay.
So focus in on the point that you want to make for each part of that. So you can show an overview of the electron transport chain, but if you want to talk about oxidative phosphorylation, zoom in on that. You can make it even like a dynamic zoom in and focus their attention just on their part of it. And I would actually eliminate the background, the whole thing, so it's not a distractor. Probably one of the biggest places I see something like this is in scientific meetings when you're trying to present data. And presenting data can be very challenging. And everyone feels the need to throw their demographic tables up there or the results table, right? Why? Because nobody's getting any of that. You need to think, what is the point of this? If you want people to know that 50% of women are not getting EKGs in time, then put a big 50% up there and focus them on that concept. Because otherwise it's just extraneous load and it's actually detrimental. But it's hard to break away from that feeling of I've got to get all my data up there. It's hard. It is hard. I struggle with it too. But think about and you can tell your audience, like, you can put the slide up and be like, this is the data that we got, but I want to focus your attention on this one aspect and blow it up big and keep it simple, because they're much more likely to remember it that way.
Thoughts on Prezi? Have you used
Prezi makes me seasick. And it's glitzy, it's kind of fun, but at the end of the day, you can do pretty much everything in Prezi that you could do in PowerPoint. It's a distractor. It increases the extraneous load. And honest to God, it makes me seize.
I think so. Prezi can be done well, but I think it's much more challenging to do well than a normal slide deck. So if you're not comfortable with the user interface, I would tend to avoid it. Its real strength is in showing overarching relationships, so you can show how things are connected in time and space if that's what's important to you for your presentation. If that's not the goal of your presentation, it's not the right modality.
Yeah, I've heard too, if you're going to sort of poll your audience and change directions midstream, that gives you the opportunity to do that because you can go down a different pathway on it.
Hyperlinks can allow some of that capability as well within PowerPoint or Keynote.
We should be using the microphone just for questions, because this is being recorded.
Really simple. Just wondering if you have a preference over Keynote versus PowerPoint, or comments about that.
Either one can be used poorly or effectively. So it's going to come down to what your preference is in terms of the user interface. If you're a Mac user, you might find Keynote to be more intuitive for you. My recommendation is no matter what program you're using, stay away from the pre-formatted and templated slides and use just a blank background, either white or black, dealer's choice. Usually that would be my number one thought on that one.
Keynote historically had the advantage with video. It handled video much better. You could embed the video directly in it. The newer versions of PowerPoint allow you to do the same thing. So they're really sort of narrowing the differences. My only reservation with Keynote is most big national meetings still prefer PowerPoint. And so that becomes a bit of a challenge. So either one is fine.
Hi, sorry, I came in late, so you may have addressed this already, but I just wanted to ask. I find that I struggle with actually making what I want the slide to look like to actually happen. Like, I need somebody to give me a tutorial on this is how you move this here, and this is how you crop it, and this is how you turn it, and this is how you. Where can I have somebody teach me all of that? Is there a?
Contact me and I'll send you a presentation.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
It really is. It's enormous, but yeah. If people actually want to know the nuts and bolts, I've done talks on that. If you want, just email me and I can get you those sort of tutorial walkthroughs, because yeah, the logistics sometimes, and it varies between the different versions of PowerPoint and Keynote and everything else. So, but once you start to do it and play around with it, it becomes a lot more intuitive.
And I think too, there are probably, if you learned 3 things and not worry about all the bells and whistles, it will take you a long way. So I think like my first key is like learn how to format the background with an image, and so that you can just have one big image up there. I think that's really like one of the biggest first steps. And then there's probably like 1 or 2 other things. If you figure out how to do a couple of the animation features where it's showing up at the same time of things that you're saying, and then everything else gets a lot easier after that.
One other suggestion from experience is that if you have some technical question about how to do X in Y program, if you Google that and look for a video, there is someone who's already made a video of how to do that.
Yeah. The final closing thought, I mentioned it briefly to this group. The idea of minimizing text, it's a little uncomfortable at first. You have to know your material well and rehearse it. It pays huge dividends in the end in terms of your learners. But the other really cool thing is it really is liberating for you as the presenter, because they don't know what your script is. They don't know what you're trying to say or what points you're going to get across. And if you forget something, it's okay. They'll never know. And so it allows you to get up and tell a story and be much more relaxed and have fun up there, which is what this is supposed to be. Teaching is supposed to be fun, rather than reading off your slides, afraid that you're going to miss something. All right, so engage your right brain, play around with it, have fun with your presentations. That's it. Get out of here.